Clara stepped into the grand lobby of the bank, feeling the hum of activity all around her. Her simple attire, a modest dress, well-worn shoes, and a delicate scarf tied around her neck, seemed out of place amid the sleek, polished surfaces and high-end suits. The space buzzed with professionals speaking in hushed tones, their every word drenched in authority. She moved carefully, her calm gaze taking in the bustling scene, finally landing on the banker at the far counter, Mr. Dawson. He stood tall and sharp in a tailored suit, a watch that gleamed under the lights, and an expression that seemed to say he held all the answers. Clara approached with purpose, her stride steady and unfazed, but Mr. Dawson barely looked up as she arrived in front of him. He took one quick glance at her attire, his eyes giving away a flicker of disdain before he plastered on a stiff smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said with a practiced politeness that felt more like an obligation than a greeting. "How may I help you?" Clara returned his gaze calmly. "I'd like to talk about some investment opportunities," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Mr. Dawson's smile tightened, the faintest hint of impatience crossing his face. He glanced around, noting the other clients waiting, each of them dressed in designer clothes, exuding affluence. His eyes returned to Clara, clearly not impressed. "Ma'am, we do offer a range of savings options," he said, voice laced with the slightest edge of condescension. "Perhaps a high-yield savings account would be more suitable." Clara smiled, unfazed. "Actually, I was interested in something a bit more substantial," she replied, her words measured, revealing no trace of offense. But Mr. Dawson's brow furrowed as he tried to hold back a sigh. "These kinds of investments require a certain understanding of financial markets," he said, his tone now more patronizing than polite. "They can be quite complex, you see." Clara's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "I understand that," she replied simply, giving no hint of the knowledge she carried. "I'd like to look into some tech and renewable energy portfolios." The banker's expression flickered with surprise for a brief moment before he quickly masked it. He forced a short laugh, as though amused by what he assumed was a misunderstanding. "Yes, well, those areas can be quite volatile," he said, still trying to keep his composure. "The markets are unpredictable, and returns aren't guaranteed." Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she nodded, showing she understood. She watched him with quiet curiosity, as though she were assessing him just as much as he was assessing her. He seemed thrown off by her calmness, glancing around as though seeking an escape from the conversation. His patience waned, but he kept a tight smile, a small spark of irritation lurking in his eyes. Mr. Dawson cleared his throat, shifting his weight as if to brush her off politely. His gaze darted towards the queue forming behind her, signaling that he had more important clients waiting. "Perhaps I could direct you to one of our junior associates," he suggested, his voice coated in a thin veneer of courtesy. "They could provide you with more introductory-level options." His tone implied that Clara was out of her depth. Clara simply smiled, unfazed by his dismissal. "Thank you, but I came here to speak with someone experienced. I'm looking for advice on significant investments." Her words were calm, but her gaze held firm, giving no hint of backing down. Mr. Dawson sighed, the barely concealed frustration now plain in his expression. "Well, let's not waste your time or mine," he muttered under his breath. Leaning forward, he added with a hint of impatience, "I'm not sure you understand how involved these investments can be. There's considerable risk involved, and they require a level of expertise that, well, not everyone has." He gave her a pointed look, his meaning unmistakable. Clara remained unfazed, her face still calm, her expression almost bemused. "I believe I understand," she replied. Her voice was steady, carrying a sense of conviction that seemed to catch him off guard. She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in, then continued. "Could you tell me more about the recent returns in tech and renewables? I heard there have been some interesting developments in those sectors." Her words hung in the air, and for a fleeting moment, Mr. Dawson's mask of composure slipped. His eyes flickered with surprise, as if he hadn't expected someone like her to have a clue about market sectors, let alone specific trends. But just as quickly, his skepticism returned. He straightened, clearly determined to set her straight once and for all. "Ma'am, it's not as simple as it sounds," he replied, his tone turning colder. "Investing in those areas requires capital, quite a bit of capital." He let the words linger, as if expecting her to suddenly back down, to realize her mistake, and leave quietly. But Clara simply nodded, looking thoughtful. She seemed to be considering his words carefully, her eyes meeting his without a hint of intimidation. "I understand that well," she said, her voice calm and unwavering. Mr. Dawson shifted uncomfortably, sensing that his attempts to steer her away were having little effect. His patience was thinning, his professional facade beginning to crack. He glanced at her again, his gaze sharp and probing, as though trying to find some indication that she was out of place or lost. Clara, however, continued to stand her ground, her steady eyes observing him with an almost serene calm. "All right then," he said, his voice clipped. He opened his tablet and swiped through a few screens, a forced politeness hanging over him like a thin veil. "For someone interested in tech and renewable energy, we have some high-yield portfolios," he explained, his tone cautious, as though he were revealing something beyond her reach. "But as I mentioned, these are volatile. If you're not prepared for fluctuations and risks, it may be challenging." Clara listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "I understand. Could you provide me with specifics on the returns for the last quarter in those sectors?" she asked, her voice calm, almost casual, as if this were a common topic for her. She paused, her face softening slightly as she added, "And I'd be interested in knowing more about the projections for next quarter as well." Mr. Dawson froze for a moment, caught off guard. There was something in her tone, a quiet authority, that unsettled him, but he quickly brushed it off, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "With all due respect, ma'am, I'm not sure if that level of detail would be necessary for what you're looking to invest. If I may, most clients in your position tend to prefer simpler options." Clara raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a gentle, almost amused smile. "And what position is that?" she asked softly, her eyes never leaving his face. For a second, Mr. Dawson faltered, realizing he'd perhaps overstepped, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. He forced a smile. "I only meant, for clients just beginning an investment, it's usually more advisable to start small, to minimize risk." Clara nodded, as though she were deeply considering his advice. "Thank you," she said. "It's wise of you to offer such caution. However, I assure you I'm quite aware of the risks." Her calmness threw him off yet again. He cleared his throat, visibly flustered but determined to keep control of the conversation. "In that case, perhaps we can explore our low-risk bonds and annuities," he replied, as if making a final attempt to steer her back to what he deemed appropriate. His eyes flicked to the polished, impeccably dressed clients behind her, his impatience growing. It was clear he wanted this conversation to end, but Clara leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "Mr. Dawson," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "I appreciate your concern for my investment position, but I believe I made myself clear. I'm here to discuss significant, high-growth options. I came to this branch because I was told it's staffed with the best and most knowledgeable advisors. Was I mistaken?" Her words landed with a quiet finality that took Mr. Dawson by surprise. For a moment, he simply stared at her, his mask of professional indifference slipping just enough to reveal a hint of irritation. He seemed to realize that this old woman wasn't going to be easily dismissed, and that she wasn't as clueless as he had assumed. His jaw tightened slightly as he straightened, now forced to take her seriously, if only because there was no polite way left to avoid it. "Well then," he said through gritted teeth, his tone colder, "if you're certain, I suppose we can proceed with the high-growth portfolios." He pulled up some data on his screen, the colors of the charts and graphs reflecting off his glasses as he glanced up at her. "But as I mentioned, these require considerable capital. I trust you understand that?" Clara gave a single calm nod. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't," she replied, her voice steady, unyielding. Mr. Dawson's fingers moved quickly across the tablet screen as he brought up more detailed figures, charts, and projections. His tone was brisk, almost detached, as he launched into a rehearsed explanation about the high-growth portfolios, clearly assuming she wouldn't comprehend the complexities. As he spoke, he peppered his explanations with financial jargon, casting quick glances at her face to see if she would falter, perhaps show some sign of confusion. Clara remained attentive, listening carefully, her expression unwavering. Every now and then she would nod thoughtfully or make a small comment that demonstrated her understanding of what he was saying. "And how has the sector performed in the last 5 years?" she inquired, her voice even and calm. "Particularly the returns in renewable energy?" Mr. Dawson blinked, momentarily thrown by her question. He hesitated, scrolling through more data to pull up the information she requested. "Well, as you might expect, the returns fluctuate due to the volatile nature of the industry," he replied, his tone carrying a faint hint of irritation. "It's not always easy to predict where these markets are headed, which is why we generally advise clients to diversify." Clara nodded. "Of course, but with the recent growth in green energy stocks, I would expect a steady upward trend." Her gaze was steady as she spoke, watching Mr. Dawson's reaction closely. He forced a tight smile. "Yes, well, that's one way to look at it," he replied, his voice growing terser by the moment. "Though I must say our high-net-worth clients usually look beyond these trends and rely on expert analysis." Clara let out a small, polite laugh, and for a moment, a twinkle of amusement flickered in her eyes. "Expert analysis is indeed valuable," she agreed, "but I like to stay informed myself. After all, one never knows when new opportunities might arise." Mr. Dawson's irritation was now apparent. He straightened, clasping his hands in front of him, his tone becoming even more formal. "Very well, ma'am. If you're determined to pursue these options, I suppose we can proceed with the paperwork for an initial deposit." He let the last word hang, his eyes scanning her face as if expecting her to hesitate or reveal some uncertainty. Clara's face remained calm. "And what would you consider an appropriate initial deposit for these kinds of investments, Mr. Dawson?" she asked, her tone carrying a quiet challenge that didn't go unnoticed. He cleared his throat, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "For these portfolios, we typically start with a minimum investment of $500,000. But of course, larger contributions allow for a broader selection within the high-growth range." Clara's expression didn't change. She simply reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook, flipping it open with a practiced motion. The calm precision of her actions left Mr. Dawson momentarily stunned, his smug smile fading. With a smooth, practiced hand, Clara began writing, the quiet scratch of her pen filling the tense silence between them. She finished, tore out the check, and extended it towards him without a word. Mr. Dawson reached out mechanically, his eyes widening as he caught sight of the figure she had written. A sum well above the minimum, an amount that surpassed his expectations entirely. For a moment, he could only stare at the check, stunned into silence. When he finally looked up at Clara, she was watching him with that same calm, unwavering gaze, a hint of quiet amusement playing in her eyes. Mr. Dawson blinked, the shock lingering on his face as he tried to regain his composure. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile that now appeared unsteady. "Well, that's quite generous," he stammered, his voice lacking the confident edge it held moments before. The sum on the check was no small amount. It was, in fact, well above what he handled with most clients in his portfolio. Yet, Clara's composed demeanor left him unsettled, as if he'd somehow misjudged her from the start. Clara offered a gentle smile, almost as if she found his reaction amusing. "I believe that should be sufficient to get things moving, don't you think?" she replied smoothly, her words light yet pointed. She folded her hands gracefully, waiting for his next response. Mr. Dawson's eyes darted from the check back to her face, attempting to mask his embarrassment. Yes, of course, he replied, now scrambling to restore a sense of control over the situation. I'll set this up with our high-yield tech and renewable portfolios as requested. It's not often we see clients investing with such, decisiveness. Clara's smile grew a fraction. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. I find it best not to waste anyone's time, she replied, her tone as pleasant as ever, though her words held an unmistakable weight. Realizing he was now on unstable ground, Mr. Dawson moved quickly, his fingers tapping nervously on the tablet as he prepared the necessary forms. As he worked, he shot her an occasional glance, his expression a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Clara's calm presence, the quiet confidence with which she'd written the check, left him questioning his initial assumptions. He felt an unspoken challenge in her demeanor, a reminder of her capability that unsettled him. Trying to regain his footing, he cleared his throat. I must say, I apologize, I didn't catch your last name, he said, attempting a smile, though his gaze was now respectful. Clara tilted her head slightly, her smile warm but her eyes assessing. It's Ms. Clara Hayes, she replied simply, her tone polite but firm, as if allowing him a glimpse into the authority she carried. I suppose my name may not be familiar in your circles, but I have made it my business to stay informed in areas that matter. Mr. Dawson nodded, suddenly unsure of how to respond. He felt as if he were sitting before someone of significant importance, though he still couldn't piece together why he felt this way. He decided to tread carefully, choosing his words with newfound respect. Well, Ms. Hayes, he said, his voice softer now, I must admit, you've demonstrated quite an understanding of these markets. It's rare to meet someone who enters with such awareness. Clara's gaze softened slightly, her expression one of patience and experience. One learns when one has spent years observing patterns, Mr. Dawson, she replied, her words carrying a wisdom he hadn't expected. Success often rewards those who are patient and, of course, respectful. The last word lingered between them, her gaze steady on him, and for the first time, Mr. Dawson looked away, a flicker of humility passing over his face. Clara's calm yet firm tone left no doubt that she was aware of every nuance in their conversation, and had been from the very beginning. Mr. Dawson's demeanor had changed. The arrogance that once defined his tone had now been replaced by an uneasy respect, though traces of his discomfort lingered. He finished processing the check with meticulous care, his fingers moving carefully over the tablet screen, as though each tap would somehow restore his confidence. Every now and then, he would steal a glance at Clara, whose serene, composed expression remained unwavering. She watched him without judgment, but with a quiet awareness that seemed to pierce right through his guarded professionalism. As he continued working, Clara allowed her gaze to wander around the grand bank lobby. Wealth hung in the air here, woven into every polished surface, every sharply dressed employee, and every carefully arranged painting that lined the walls. She noticed a few clients stealing curious glances her way, as if wondering why an elderly woman with such unassuming attire had warranted so much attention from a senior banker. She could sense their skepticism and amusement, the judgment that radiated from their well-tailored suits and perfumed confidence. But she had long learned to carry herself with dignity, unaffected by such things. Mr. Dawson finally cleared his throat, drawing her attention back to him. Ms. Hayes, everything is in order now, he said, his voice more composed but noticeably softer. You're all set with the high-growth portfolio options in tech and renewables. Given the size of your investment, you should expect regular updates on the market performance and quarterly consultations with our top analysts. Clara nodded with a small, satisfied smile. That sounds perfect, she replied, her tone gentle but with a subtle authority that couldn't be ignored. I like to stay closely involved in these matters, so please ensure that the reports are comprehensive. Mr. Dawson, now thoroughly humbled, nodded quickly. Of course, Ms. Hayes. We'll make sure everything is detailed to your specifications. he replied, his voice almost reverent. There was a pause as he looked at her, his expression caught between awe and confusion. The unassuming woman who had initially entered his office had, within minutes, revealed a sharp intelligence and an impressive level of financial literacy. It was a shift that he was still struggling to process, and Clara could see that flicker of unease in his eyes. Feeling that the moment called for a gentle nudge, Clara spoke, her voice as calm as ever. "You know, Mr. Dawson, I believe one of the most valuable qualities in any advisor is the ability to see beyond the surface. When you take people at face value, you often miss the true depth of their character." Her words settled over him like a weight, pressing down with an undeniable truth. Mr. Dawson blinked, visibly processing her statement, his face softening with what seemed like genuine self-reflection. Clara held his gaze, allowing a few seconds of silence to pass, letting her words resonate. Finally, he nodded, a faint blush coloring his cheeks as he realized the implication of her message. I suppose you're absolutely right, Ms. Hayes," he admitted, his tone almost contrite. "I do apologize if I came across as dismissive. It's not my intention to judge any client based on appearances." Clara offered him a forgiving smile, though her eyes remained sharp, carrying a wisdom that hinted at years of experience. "I appreciate your apology, Mr. Dawson," she replied softly. "But remember, it's easy to speak of respect, harder to practice it without bias. It takes time and intention to learn that skill." For a brief moment, Mr. Dawson looked like a student, humbled and attentive in the presence of a mentor. His earlier pride had softened into a quiet humility, and Clara could sense a genuine shift in his attitude. She knew the journey from judgment to understanding was not a single step, but a process, one he seemed willing to begin. Still, Clara had not come to this bank to teach lessons, and she gently shifted the conversation back to business. "Now, could you confirm the estimated returns over the next fiscal year?" she asked, her tone all business once again. "I'd like to understand where the projections stand, especially in light of recent market trends." Mr. Dawson nodded, still visibly shaken by their previous exchange, but he regained his professional composure quickly, now treating her with the utmost respect. "Yes, absolutely," he replied, tapping his screen. "With the current upward trends in renewable energy and tech, we're looking at a projected return of roughly 12 to 15% annually. Given the size of your investment, you'll be positioned to capitalize on growth that outpaces standard market returns." Clara listened carefully, nodding in approval as he spoke. She asked a few precise questions, each one probing deeper into the fine details of the portfolio, displaying a level of insight that left Mr. Dawson impressed. By the time their discussion ended, he was fully convinced of her financial acumen, his earlier judgment replaced by genuine admiration. Finally, as the conversation wrapped up, Mr. Dawson let out a small, respectful sigh, an expression of relief, but also of newfound appreciation. "It's been a pleasure assisting you, Ms. Hayes," he said, his tone warm and genuine. "I look forward to working with you and ensuring your investment goals are fully met." Clara's gentle smile returned as she rose from her seat, gathering her purse with a graceful air. She looked around the bank lobby once more, her eyes briefly meeting those of other clients who had been watching the exchange with curiosity. Their expressions shifted, some with surprise, others with a touch of newfound respect. Before she turned to leave, Clara paused, giving Mr. Dawson one last meaningful look. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson," she said warmly. "I have a feeling this will be a rewarding partnership for both of us." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Mr. Dawson standing by his desk, watching her retreating figure with a newfound sense of respect, and a subtle, lingering curiosity about the woman who had so quietly but firmly commanded the room. As Clara walked through the bank's gleaming lobby, the faint whispers of curious clients reached her ears. She paid them no mind, her steps calm and assured, but she was well aware of the shift in their attitudes. She could feel the weight of the glances that followed her, as if they were seeing her in a new light, trying to understand who this seemingly ordinary woman truly was. Just as she neared the entrance, a familiar face caught her eye. Ms. Ramirez, a junior associate at the bank, who was handling another client nearby. Ramirez's eyes lit up in recognition when she spotted Clara. Unlike Mr. Dawson, Ms. Ramirez knew exactly who Clara was, having met her once during a high-stakes conference on sustainable investments. The younger woman had been impressed by Clara's insights and had remembered her ever since. Ms. Ramirez offered a quick nod of respect, a subtle but genuine gesture, acknowledging Clara without drawing attention to their connection. Clara returned the nod with a small smile, pleased to see someone who recognized her value without needing grand gestures or explanations. Just then, Mr. Dawson appeared at her side, clearly flustered, yet doing his best to maintain composure. It seemed he had rushed over, possibly still digesting their conversation and what he'd learned or failed to recognize about her. Clara turned to him, waiting patiently as he searched for the right words. "Ms. Hayes," he began, his voice lower, almost reverent now. "I wanted to extend my gratitude for your patience today. I may have misjudged the situation, and I apologize if I didn't initially give you the attention your expertise deserved." Clara regarded him with a steady gaze, her expression warm but unreadable. She appreciated his attempt to make amends, though she could tell he was struggling to articulate it. It wasn't easy for him, a man of considerable pride, to openly acknowledge his mistake. But she valued humility in others, and his willingness to step forward gave her a small sense of satisfaction. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson," she replied gently. "I accept your apology, and I hope today's experience serves as a reminder to look beyond appearances." She paused, letting her words settle. Sometimes the greatest opportunities are missed because they aren't immediately obvious. Mr. Dawson nodded, the sincerity in his face apparent. "I'll keep that in mind, Ms. Hayes, truly." Clara glanced around, her gaze sweeping over the other clients and employees, all of whom were now occupied with their own business yet still visibly aware of her presence. She took a slow breath, feeling a sense of calm and closure. She'd entered this bank to expand her investments, but she'd left with something more. A quiet but significant shift in perspective, one that resonated not only with Mr. Dawson, but perhaps with everyone who had observed their exchange. As she prepared to leave, Mr. Dawson, emboldened by a newfound respect for her, added, "Should you ever need any further assistance, please don't hesitate to ask. I would be honored to personally oversee your investments." Clara allowed herself a small smile, appreciative of the gesture. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson. I'll keep that in mind." She turned to exit, her steps graceful and steady, carrying herself with the quiet dignity that had defined her presence throughout their encounter. The bank's automatic doors opened, the bustling street awaiting her just beyond the glass. But before she could fully step out, a soft voice called her name. "Ms. Hayes?" Clara turned to find Ms. Ramirez, who had left her client's side and approached her with an expression of admiration. "I just wanted to say, it's always inspiring to see someone like you here," Ms. Ramirez said, her voice filled with genuine respect. "Thank you for reminding us all of what real success looks like." Clara smiled warmly, nodding in gratitude. "Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. I hope you always remember that your worth isn't measured by others' perceptions." With those words, Clara stepped into the afternoon sunlight, her presence leaving a quiet, lasting impact on everyone in that bank. She walked down the busy street, blending seamlessly into the crowd, yet carrying with her the silent knowledge of her strength and influence, qualities she had spent a lifetime cultivating, and ones that would continue to speak louder than any appearance could. As Clara stepped out onto the bustling street, she took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs and the warmth of satisfaction settle within her. She had entered that bank intending only to make a new investment, yet she had left with a subtle victory, one that reinforced the values she held dear. There was a quiet joy in knowing she had reminded people of the importance of respect and understanding. Clara had always carried herself with humility, but today she felt a renewed sense of pride, not only in her accomplishments, but in the quiet power of integrity. Her thoughts wandered to the path that had brought her here. Clara had built her fortune slowly, through years of hard work and careful planning. There had been no shortcuts, only persistence, long hours, and sacrifices few could imagine. She remembered her first small business, a modest shop in a neighborhood where she knew every customer by name. Back then, no one could have guessed she would one day become one of the largest investors in the city. Her mind drifted back to the early days, the long hours spent researching markets, studying investment trends, and learning the language of finance. She had attended seminars, pored over financial journals, and sought out mentors, always determined to understand every aspect of the businesses she invested in. Each dollar had been hard-earned, and she had protected every investment with the same care she showed her family. Those who underestimated her wisdom in finance had always been surprised, but she had learned to let them think what they wanted. Her results spoke for themselves. As she continued her walk down the bustling street, her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out to see a message from her lawyer, Mr. Patel, a trusted advisor who had been by her side for years. The message was brief, but to the point. Meeting confirmed with the board next week. Looking forward to discussing the new investment. A small smile crossed Clara's lips. This particular investment had been on her mind for months, a project she felt deeply connected to, one that would benefit communities like the one she had grown up in. Clara had always believed that wealth was a tool, not just for personal gain, but for creating positive change. The project would support local businesses and offer financial education to young entrepreneurs, a chance for them to learn and grow in ways she never had at their age. Her mind raced with ideas, each one tied to a vision she had nurtured over the years. She imagined walking into that meeting next week, surrounded by board members and executives, many of whom knew her only by name or reputation. She wondered if they, like Mr. Dawson, would initially overlook her quiet demeanor, underestimating the impact she intended to make. But, just as always, Clara knew she would let her plans and her results do the talking. As she crossed the street, the towering buildings around her cast long shadows, yet Clara felt as if she carried her own light. The small encounter at the bank was one of many, just a small piece of the legacy she was quietly building. She knew that true success wasn't about recognition or titles. It was about impact, about using her resources and knowledge to lift others. Her thoughts were interrupted as she spotted a small cafe on the corner, one she remembered from years ago. It was an old place, cozy and welcoming, with a chalkboard sign out front that read, "Come in for a coffee, stay for the company." A wave of nostalgia washed over her, reminding her of the days when she had met with young entrepreneurs here, offering them advice and encouragement as they shared their dreams with her over cups of strong coffee. Some of those same young people had gone on to build successful businesses of their own, and she cherished knowing she had played a small part in their journey. Feeling a pull of familiarity, she decided to step inside. The cafe was just as she remembered, warm with the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air and a faint hum of jazz music playing in the background. She found a quiet corner, ordered a cup of tea, and settled in, letting herself savor the moment. As she sat there, her mind drifted back to her upcoming meeting and the faces of the young people she hoped to support. The banker's words echoed faintly in her mind, a reminder of how much work there was still to be done in changing perceptions. But Clara was not discouraged. If anything, the encounter strengthened her resolve to continue her work, to build not just wealth, but bridges, to open doors for others who, like her, once faced doubt and dismissal. With each sip of tea, Clara felt her purpose deepen. She would keep moving forward, not just for herself, but for those who would come after her. Her wealth was a means to an end, and her end was clear: to leave a legacy of opportunity and respect, one that would last long after she was gone. Clara sat in the cozy cafe, sipping her tea, savoring the peace it brought after the charged encounter at the bank. As she looked out the window, watching people pass by in their hurried strides, she couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of clarity about her purpose. She had spent years reaching this point, where her influence could create real change, not only for herself, but for countless others who had once felt unseen or undervalued. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from her granddaughter, Lena. Clara's face softened as she read the text. "Grandma, are we still on for dinner tonight? I have so much to tell you." Lena had always looked up to Clara, seeing her not only as a loving grandmother but also as a role model. She was now in her early 20s, fresh out of college, and filled with big dreams about making her mark in the world. Clara saw much of herself in Lena. The same drive, the same resilience. She often shared stories of her own journey with Lena, hoping to pass down the lessons she had learned, hoping Lena would understand that success was built on perseverance, not shortcuts. Clara replied, "Of course, darling, I can't wait to hear all about it." Setting her phone aside, she felt a warmth in her chest, knowing she was part of Lena's journey, guiding her as best as she could. Her mind wandered back to the project she had just secured funding for, one that would build a resource center in an underserved neighborhood. It would be a place where people, young and old, could come to learn about financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and personal development. Clara wanted it to be a space where anyone could walk in, no matter their background or appearance, and be treated with respect and dignity. This idea had been brewing in her mind for years, inspired by the hardships she herself had faced. She remembered how, as a young woman, she had struggled to navigate a world that often dismissed her based on her appearance. Resources had been scarce, mentors even scarcer. Clara had taught herself most of what she knew, through countless hours of reading, observing, and learning from her own mistakes. This resource center would offer others what she had once needed, a supportive place to learn and grow. As she continued to sip her tea, a young woman approached her table, a friendly smile on her face. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, a bit hesitantly. "I couldn't help but notice you sitting here. You look familiar. Are you Ms. Clara Hayes?" Clara looked up, slightly surprised but nodding with a gentle smile. "Yes, I am," she replied, her tone warm. She was used to being recognized occasionally, though she never expected it. The young woman's face lit up. "I thought so. I've read about your work in the community. You're a real inspiration. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you're doing." Clara felt a surge of humility, touched by the young woman's words. "Thank you, dear," she said, her voice kind. "It means a lot to know that what I'm doing is reaching others." The woman nodded, her expression earnest. "I hope one day to be able to give back, just like you do. You've shown me, and so many others, that anything is possible with hard work and faith." Clara reached across the table, giving the young woman's hand a gentle squeeze. "You already have everything it takes. Just keep believing in yourself, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With a grateful smile, the young woman nodded and walked away, leaving Clara with a renewed sense of purpose. Moments like this reminded her of the impact she could have, far beyond the bank accounts or investment portfolios. It was these connections, the lives she touched through her work, that truly mattered. Clara glanced down at her phone again, a new determination sparking in her eyes. She would continue this path, not only for herself, but for Lena, for the young woman she had just met, and for all the others whose journeys were only beginning. Her story was still unfolding, but she felt a deep satisfaction knowing that it would be a story not of wealth, but of legacy. A legacy that others could build upon, carrying forward the values she held dear. As Clara finished her tea, she felt a quiet energy building within her, a steady resolve that had always fueled her work. She left the cafe, her mind racing with plans for the resource center and the impact it would bring. Every detail mattered, from the welcoming staff to the financial workshops that would be offered to people from all walks of life. She envisioned mentors stationed in cozy, inviting rooms, ready to guide young entrepreneurs, just as she had once yearned for guidance herself. Walking down the street, she thought about the people this center would reach. So many would enter with dreams they hadn't dared to voice, or ideas that had been dismissed by others. She knew their struggles, understood the resilience it took to pursue something in a world that often refused to see their potential. Clara wanted this center to be a place where those dreams could take root and grow, where they could find the support she'd spent years seeking on her own journey. Her steps took her toward the building that would house this vision. She had chosen it carefully, a modest structure nestled in the heart of a neighborhood filled with hard-working families and small businesses. The exterior needed work, but Clara saw its potential. To her, the building represented more than just walls. It was a beacon of hope, a place that would stand as a symbol of opportunity and empowerment. As she approached, her phone rang. It was Mr. Patel, her lawyer and trusted advisor. "Good afternoon, Clara," he greeted her, his voice calm and steady, a familiar comfort. "I wanted to confirm that everything is ready for next week's board meeting. The paperwork is finalized, and we'll be presenting the project proposal to secure additional community funding." Clara felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Patel. I appreciate your hard work on this. This project means everything to me." He chuckled warmly. "Clara, it's been an honor to work with you on this. You're creating something that will last for generations. I have no doubt the board will see the value in it." They spoke a bit longer, discussing final details, and as Clara ended the call, she gazed at the building with a renewed sense of purpose. She imagined the rooms filled with people, young parents learning to budget for their families, recent graduates honing business plans, and elder community members sharing their wisdom with the next generation. It was more than a building. It was a sanctuary of growth, a place where individuals could be reminded of their worth and potential. As she continued to envision the center's future, a thought crossed her mind. Her granddaughter, Lena, had a natural talent for connecting with people. She was compassionate and had a way of understanding others' needs. Clara wondered if Lena might one day want to be involved in the center's operations, perhaps even take on a leadership role. She smiled, thinking of how proud she would be to see Lena carrying forward this legacy, shaping it with her own vision and values. Lost in her thoughts, Clara didn't notice the man approaching her until he was nearly beside her. He was young, perhaps in his early 30s, with a hopeful yet nervous expression. "Excuse me, Ms. Hayes?" he asked, his voice tentative but respectful. Clara turned to him, her eyes warm and encouraging. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" The man shifted slightly, gathering his thoughts. "I just wanted to say thank you. I've been following your work in the community for years. Your story, it's been an inspiration for people like me." Clara smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you, dear. That means so much to me. And what is it that you do?" "I run a small tech startup," he replied, his voice filling with a quiet pride. "It's been tough balancing everything, finding the right resources, but hearing about your journey has given me hope." Clara's eyes sparkled with interest. "A tech startup, you say? That's wonderful. I know the challenges of building something from scratch, but remember, persistence is your strongest tool. Don't let anyone's doubt, or your own, keep you from moving forward." He nodded, visibly encouraged, and they spoke a bit more about his business, his aspirations, and the challenges he faced. Clara offered him a few pointers, sharing small pieces of wisdom she had gathered over her lifetime. The young man listened intently, his eyes filled with newfound determination. As they finished, he smiled, a spark of confidence shining through his earlier hesitation. "Thank you, Ms. Hayes. I won't forget this conversation." Clara watched him walk away, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Every encounter like this reminded her that her journey had meaning beyond personal success. It was about paving the way for others, about leaving something behind that would empower future generations. Turning back to the building, Clara felt a surge of excitement. The resource center was only the beginning. Her legacy would live on through the people she inspired, each one carrying forward the lessons she had learned, each one becoming a beacon of resilience and possibility. With a steady heart and a renewed sense of purpose, Clara took one last look at the building before heading off into the afternoon light. There was much work to be done, and she was ready for every step of it. As Clara walked away from the building, the weight of the project filled her with a sense of both anticipation and responsibility. This was her dream, but it was also her gift to the community, a legacy that would remain long after she was gone. Her mind raced with possibilities, and as she made her way down the bustling street, she thought about all the pieces still falling into place, each one a step closer to making her vision a reality. She decided to visit a nearby community center, one she had been involved with for years. This center had been a starting point for her outreach efforts, and was where she had first seen the power of accessible resources. Inside, she was welcomed by familiar faces and warm smiles, people who knew her as both a supporter and a mentor. Clara had been investing in this community long before she'd amassed wealth, believing that her time and guidance were as valuable as any financial contribution. She approached the office of Ms. Johnson, the director of the center, who had become one of Clara's close allies in the neighborhood. Ms. Johnson was a woman of remarkable strength, known for her fierce dedication to helping those in need. She had been instrumental in Clara's journey, both as a friend and as someone who shared her vision for community empowerment. When Clara knocked and entered, Ms. Johnson looked up from her desk, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Clara, I wasn't expecting you today," she said, standing up to give her a warm hug. "How have you been?" Clara returned the embrace, feeling a familiar comfort in her presence. "I'm well, Ms. Johnson. Just came by to check on things and share a little news," she said, her voice carrying a hint of excitement. "Oh?" Ms. Johnson's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "What are you up to now?" Clara took a seat, settling comfortably before she began. "I'm finally moving forward with the new resource center. I've secured the location, and the investment is set to support everything we discussed. Financial literacy programs, entrepreneurial workshops, mentorship for young people. It's going to be a place where anyone can come and feel that their dreams are valid, where they'll have the tools they need to succeed." Ms. Johnson's face softened as she listened, her gaze filled with admiration. "Clara, that's incredible," she said quietly. "You're giving people opportunities that most of us only dreamed of when we were younger. You're building something that will uplift generations." Clara smiled, humbled by the words of someone she respected so deeply. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ms. Johnson. You were the first to show me that this kind of work was possible. The way you built this center and fought for the people here, seeing that gave me hope. I want to expand that same sense of hope into other neighborhoods, to reach even more people." Ms. Johnson reached across the desk, taking Clara's hand in hers, a silent but powerful gesture. "Clara, you're a light in this community. We've watched you go from that young woman with big dreams to someone who's changing lives in ways that are almost unimaginable. I can't tell you how proud we all are of you." Clara felt a swell of emotion as she squeezed her friend's hand. There were so many moments when she had questioned herself, doubted her vision, or felt the weight of the obstacles before her. But Ms. Johnson's words reminded her of the strength that lay within her, a strength built on years of perseverance, hard work, and a commitment to lifting others as she rose. They spent the next hour discussing the center, brainstorming ideas for its layout, the kinds of programs they wanted to prioritize, and the types of mentors they hoped to attract. Clara shared her dream of involving local businesses, enlisting their support not only in funding but also in offering internships and hands-on training for young adults who were eager to learn, but often overlooked by larger institutions. Ms. Johnson's enthusiasm was contagious, and the two women spoke with a shared vision, their ideas interweaving into a powerful plan that could reshape the future of the community. As they talked, Clara couldn't help but think about Lena. She wondered if her granddaughter understood the depth of her vision, how every step she took was rooted in a desire to give back. Lena was ambitious and driven, but Clara hoped she would one day realize that true success went beyond personal achievement. She wanted Lena to feel the same pull toward community, to see that the greatest fulfillment came from empowering others. She resolved to talk to her about it that evening, to invite Lena to become more involved, to learn not only about business, but about purpose. Finally, Ms. Johnson leaned back in her chair, exhaling with a smile. "Clara, this is going to be something extraordinary. I can feel it. You're creating more than a center, you're creating a movement." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of her friend's words. "That's exactly what I hope for, Ms. Johnson. A movement, one that will continue even when I'm gone. I want others to carry this forward, to keep expanding this vision until every person, no matter where they come from, has the chance to live out their potential." The two women sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Clara felt a deep gratitude for the people who had believed in her, who had stood by her through the years, and for the friendships she had forged with others who shared her commitment to the community. They were not just friends, they were allies, united in a purpose that went far beyond any one of them. As Clara prepared to leave, Ms. Johnson stood up and gave her a final hug. "Promise me you'll keep me updated on every step of this, Clara. I want to be there when you cut the ribbon, to celebrate with you and everyone who believes in what you're building." Clara smiled, holding her friend tightly. "I promise. And I want you by my side for every part of this journey." Leaving the center, Clara felt the weight of responsibility blend with an undeniable sense of purpose. The future of her resource center was taking shape, and she knew it would be a beacon of opportunity for years to come. Clara walked away from the community center, her heart brimming with both gratitude and determination. She felt the strength of her purpose renewed, like a flame stoked by the support and shared vision she had found with Ms. Johnson. As she continued down the bustling street, her mind turned to Lena, her granddaughter, whose youthful ambition and vibrant curiosity were a source of pride and joy. She wanted to share this vision with Lena, to show her that the world of business wasn't solely about profit, but also about impact, the kind that transforms lives and brings hope to places where it's scarce. Later that evening, Clara arrived at her favorite restaurant, a cozy, family-owned place she had frequented for years. It was a simple place, known for its warm atmosphere and delicious food, where she and Lena often dined together, sharing stories and laughter. Clara always appreciated the sense of familiarity here, a place that had become a sanctuary for their family memories. Lena was already waiting at their usual corner booth, her face lighting up when she saw her grandmother enter. She jumped up to give Clara a warm hug, squeezing her tight. "Grandma, I've missed you," she exclaimed, her excitement infectious. Clara hugged her back, feeling the warmth and energy that only Lena seemed to bring. "I've missed you too, sweetheart," Clara replied, her voice soft. They settled into the booth, ordering their usual dishes, and soon the table was filled with steaming plates and the comforting aroma of spices and herbs. Clara noticed the spark in Lena's eyes, the eagerness she brought to every new chapter of her life. It reminded her so much of herself at that age, restless, determined, and filled with big dreams. As they ate, Lena launched into stories about her recent adventures, a new project she was working on, the challenges of her job, and the dreams she held for the future. Clara listened attentively, proud of the young woman Lena was becoming, someone unafraid to chase her ambitions. She watched Lena's hands move animatedly as she spoke, her words filled with excitement and energy. Finally, as the conversation quieted, Clara gently placed her hand on Lena's, her gaze warm, yet serious. "Lena, there's something I want to talk to you about," she said, her voice carrying a hint of the purpose that had guided her all these years. Lena looked at her, curious. "Of course, Grandma. What's on your mind?" Clara took a deep breath, her mind gathering the words she hoped would resonate. "I know you're on your own path now, discovering what you want to do and the mark you want to make. And I'm proud of you, so proud. But there's something important I want you to understand, something I had to learn the hard way." Lena's eyes softened, her full attention on Clara. "I'm listening, Grandma." Clara continued, her voice filled with the wisdom of years. "When I was building my life, my businesses, I faced countless obstacles. People doubted me, dismissed me, and told me I was aiming too high. But I realized that success, true success, isn't just about proving people wrong or building wealth. It's about using what we have to lift others, to create opportunities for those who might not have had them otherwise. Lena nodded, her expression thoughtful as she absorbed her grandmother's words. Clara could see a flicker of understanding in her eyes, as if the message was beginning to sink in. "I'm building a new resource center, Lena," Clara continued, her voice growing softer yet filled with conviction. "It's a place where people can come to learn, to grow, and to find hope. I want to help young people, people who are overlooked, and give them the tools they need to succeed. And I'd love for you to be part of it, to work alongside me and to see firsthand the impact we can make." Lena's eyes widened, a spark of excitement mingling with admiration. "Grandma, that sounds incredible," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I had no idea you were planning something like this. I'd be honored to help. I'd love to learn from you, to see how you've built all this." Clara felt a surge of pride, seeing her granddaughter's willingness to embrace this vision. "It would mean the world to me to have you by my side," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You have so much potential, Lena, and I want you to see that success isn't just about reaching the top alone. It's about building something that others can climb as well." Lena reached across the table, squeezing Clara's hand. "Thank you, Grandma. I promise I'll do my best. I want to learn everything you can teach me, and maybe one day I'll be able to carry on what you've started." Clara's heart swelled with emotion, a sense of fulfillment she had rarely felt so deeply, knowing that Lena understood, that she wanted to be part of this legacy, made all the years of hard work, every sacrifice, every challenge feel worth it. She could see a future where Lena would continue the work, where this legacy of empowerment and respect would live on through her granddaughter's hands. They spent the rest of the evening talking about the resource center, sharing ideas and dreams, their voices soft with the promise of what lay ahead. Clara explained her vision in detail, describing the workshops, the mentorship programs, and the community outreach initiatives she had planned. Lena listened intently, her enthusiasm clear as she asked questions and offered ideas of her own. By the time they finished their meal, they had mapped out the beginnings of a new partnership, a collaboration rooted in both love and purpose. Clara felt as if she were passing down a part of herself, entrusting her values and dreams to Lena, confident that her granddaughter would carry them forward with the same integrity and dedication. As they left the restaurant, walking arm in arm down the street, Clara felt the warmth of Lena's presence beside her, a steady and hopeful reminder of the future they were building together. She knew that this journey would continue, that her vision would live on in Lena's hands, and that the legacy she had worked so hard to create would find new life, new energy, and new purpose. Under the streetlights, Clara looked up at the night sky, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Her life had been filled with challenges, but each one had led her here, to this moment with Lena by her side, a future brimming with possibility. And for the first time she felt that her story, the story of a woman who had started with nothing but dreams and determination, was finally complete. The next morning, Clara woke with a renewed sense of energy, feeling as though a spark had been ignited within her. Her conversation with Lena had left her filled with a quiet joy and a powerful sense of purpose. She knew she was no longer building this vision alone. Lena's willingness to join her had given Clara's dream a new depth, an intergenerational legacy that would carry on with strength and passion. As she sipped her morning tea, Clara thought about the next steps in bringing the resource center to life. There were still countless details to manage: contractors, staffing, partnerships, and the array of programs she wanted to offer. She knew each step would demand her attention, but she was prepared. With Lena's help and her community allies by her side, the vision was closer than ever to becoming a reality. Clara's first call of the day was to Mr. Patel. He picked up promptly, his voice calm and friendly. "Good morning, Clara. How are you today?" Clara smiled, her tone light. "Good morning, Mr. Patel. I'm wonderful. I wanted to discuss a few details about the center and our upcoming board presentation. There's so much in motion, and I want to make sure we're prepared." Mr. Patel chuckled. "Clara, I have no doubt you'll be ready. Your attention to detail is second to none. And I'm pleased to say that I've already had a few positive responses from the board members. They're eager to hear your proposal." Clara felt a surge of confidence. She had been meticulous in planning the presentation, outlining the social impact the center would create, the community partnerships they'd foster, and the long-term benefits for everyone involved. She knew that some board members would focus on the financial aspects, and she was prepared to show them how the resource center would benefit the community in ways that numbers alone could not measure. As she hung up, Clara went over her notes, mentally preparing herself for the meeting. This center was more than just a project. It was a legacy, something that would continue long after she was gone. It represented not only her dreams, but the dreams of countless individuals who would walk through its doors, ready to learn, to grow, and to rise above their circumstances. Later that day, she and Lena met at the construction site of the new center. The building was still in its early stages of renovation, with workers moving in and out, scaffolding surrounding the structure, and the sounds of hammering and machinery filling the air. To some, it might have looked like chaos, but to Clara, it was the beautiful beginning of something transformative. Lena's eyes were wide with wonder as she took in the scene. "It's going to be amazing, Grandma," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I can already see it. The classrooms, the offices, the community space. This place is going to change lives." Clara smiled, her gaze softening as she looked at Lena. "That's the goal, my dear. To give people a space where they can feel seen, where they know they're valued and capable of achieving their dreams." As they walked through the building, Clara pointed out different areas, explaining her vision for each space. "Over here, we'll have the main entrance," she said, gesturing to an open area where natural light flooded in through large windows. "I want people to feel welcome as soon as they walk in. This isn't just another office. It's a place of hope." They moved to a larger room toward the back of the building, where Clara's voice grew with excitement. "And here, we'll have the main classroom space. This is where workshops and seminars will be held, where we'll bring in mentors and speakers to inspire everyone who comes here." Lena listened intently, her own excitement growing as she imagined the lives that would be touched within these walls. "And what about the mentorship program you mentioned?" she asked. "Will we have spaces for one-on-one sessions?" Clara nodded, her face lighting up. "Yes, we're setting up private rooms just down that hallway. People need privacy, a safe space where they can ask questions without feeling judged. Mentorship is one of the core aspects of this center, and I want it to be as supportive as possible." As they continued to explore, Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude. This wasn't just a building. It was a vessel for dreams, a place where young people could see their own potential reflected back at them. She had come so far from the days when she'd had little more than her ambition and her vision, and now she was creating a space that would allow others to do the same. When they finished their tour of the building, Clara and Lena stepped outside, the cool breeze a refreshing contrast to the lively energy inside. Clara looked at her granddaughter, her heart swelling with pride. "Lena," she began, her voice steady, "I want you to know that this isn't just about my legacy. It's about you, too. One day, this center will be yours to lead, to shape in your own way. I've built the foundation, but it will be up to you to carry it forward." Lena's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I'll do my best, Grandma. I promise. I want to make you proud, to carry on what you've started and to keep growing it." Clara smiled, placing a gentle hand on Lena's shoulder. "You've already made me proud, my dear. Just remember, this isn't just a place for others to grow. It's a place for you to learn as well. Every person you meet here will teach you something, just as they'll learn from you." They stood together, looking at the building that was slowly transforming into a sanctuary of hope and opportunity. Clara felt a sense of peace, knowing she was leaving her vision in capable hands. She knew that Lena would carry it forward with the same compassion and determination that had guided her own journey. The resource center would open its doors soon, and when it did, it would be the beginning of a new chapter. Not only for the community, but for Clara's family, for Lena, and for all those who would find their way through its doors. As they turned to leave, Clara's heart swelled with fulfillment, knowing that she had created something that would endure, something that would continue to grow and uplift others, carrying her legacy far beyond her own time. With Lena by her side, Clara knew that her story was not ending. It was only the beginning. In the following weeks, Clara poured herself into the final stages of planning and preparation. She worked tirelessly with Lena and her team to ensure that every aspect of the resource center embodied the values she had envisioned. From the design of the community spaces to the list of mentors, Clara paid attention to each detail, determined that the center would be a place of inspiration and empowerment. As the opening day approached, excitement buzzed through the community. Word had spread quickly, and people from all over the neighborhood were eager to see what Clara had created. Flyers were posted, invitations were sent, and local businesses volunteered their support, offering refreshments, supplies, and even workshops. It was a community-wide effort, and Clara felt humbled and grateful for the support. The night before the grand opening, Clara found herself alone in the resource center, quietly walking through the halls and rooms she had spent so many months envisioning. The building, now complete, was everything she had dreamed of and more. Soft, welcoming lights illuminated the space, casting a warm glow on the walls and creating an inviting atmosphere. Comfortable chairs and tables were arranged thoughtfully in each room, and artwork from local artists adorned the walls, each piece chosen to inspire and connect with those who would soon fill the center. As Clara moved through each room, she imagined the laughter, conversations, and learning that would soon echo within these walls. She thought about the young people who would come here with dreams, looking for guidance and encouragement. She thought about the parents, the single mothers, the recent graduates, the young professionals, all those who needed a place to feel seen and valued. Finally, Clara arrived in the main classroom, a large open space with rows of chairs facing a small stage where speakers and mentors would address the audience. She took a seat in the front row, allowing herself a quiet moment to reflect. She thought of her journey, the challenges and setbacks, the moments of doubt that had been part of her path. She remembered the early days when she had struggled to make ends meet, when success had seemed out of reach, and how she had persisted, knowing that every hardship was shaping her resilience. Her thoughts turned to the people who had helped her along the way, to mentors who had believed in her, and to friends like Ms. Johnson who had encouraged her when the journey felt overwhelming. Clara's heart filled with gratitude, realizing that this center wasn't just about her achievements. It was about the community that had supported her, the people who had been part of her story. In the silence of the room, Clara felt the presence of everyone who had contributed to her success, as if they were there with her, sharing in this moment. She closed her eyes, a gentle smile on her face, feeling a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. The next morning, the resource center was abuzz with activity. Volunteers set up tables, arranged refreshments, and helped prepare the space for the opening ceremony. Clara and Lena arrived early, greeted by a crowd of supporters and well-wishers, each person eager to celebrate the culmination of her vision. Lena stayed by her side, her excitement evident as she greeted familiar faces from the community. She had grown so much over these past few months, working closely with Clara, learning not only about the business aspects of the center, but also about the deeper purpose it served. Clara watched her granddaughter with pride, seeing the compassion and confidence that had blossomed within her. As the opening ceremony began, Clara was invited to the stage. She looked out at the crowd, taking in the faces of people she had come to know so well, neighbors, friends, colleagues, and young people she hoped would benefit from this space. She took a deep breath, feeling a wave of emotion as she prepared to speak. "Thank you all for being here today," Clara began, her voice steady but filled with warmth. "This center is more than a building. It's a place where dreams can take root. It's a space for growth, learning, and hope. And it's here because of each of you, because of the support, encouragement, and belief you've given not only to me, but to each other." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This has been a long journey, one that started with humble beginnings. I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to feel that your dreams are beyond reach. That's why this center exists, so that no one else has to face those doubts alone." The crowd was silent, listening intently as Clara shared her heart with them. She could see tears in a few eyes, smiles on many faces, each person moved by the sincerity of her words. "This center belongs to all of us," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "It's a place where anyone can walk through these doors and find support, respect, and guidance. I want each of you to know that you are valued, that your dreams matter, and that we believe in your potential." Clara glanced over at Lena, who was watching her with pride, her own eyes glistening. In that moment, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of connection, not just to her family, but to every person in the room, to the entire community. This was the legacy she had worked so hard to build, a legacy of empowerment and unity. As she concluded her speech, the crowd erupted into applause, cheers filling the air. Clara's heart swelled, overwhelmed by the love and support surrounding her. She felt the strength of the community, the impact of her work, and the promise of the future. After the ceremony, Clara and Lena moved through the center, talking to the guests, hearing stories from people eager to share how the center would impact their lives. Young men and women approached them, expressing gratitude for the opportunities the center would provide, each person inspired by Clara's journey and moved by her commitment to their futures. Toward the end of the day, as the sun began to set and the crowd started to thin, Clara and Lena found themselves back in the main classroom, now filled with echoes of laughter and new beginnings. They sat together, feeling the weight and beauty of the day's events. "Grandma," Lena said softly, her eyes shining, "thank you for showing me what it means to lead with purpose. I'll never forget this day, and I promise I'll do everything I can to honor what you've created here." Clara reached over, taking Lena's hand in hers. "I know you will, my dear. You have everything you need to carry this forward. Remember, this place is not only for others to grow, it's for you to grow too. Keep your heart open, and always lead with compassion." They sat together in silence, watching the last rays of sunlight filter through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. In that quiet moment, Clara felt a peace she had rarely known, a deep satisfaction in knowing that her life's work was complete, her legacy secure in the hands of the next generation. The Resource Center was only the beginning. Clara knew that the seed she had planted would continue to grow, nurtured by the love and dedication of those who believed in her vision. And as she looked at Lena, she knew that the future was bright, filled with endless possibilities, and that her story, now woven into the lives of others, would live on, carrying her legacy of hope and empowerment far beyond the walls of this center. In the days that followed, Clara watched as the Resource Center blossomed into a lively hub of energy and learning. The rooms that had once been empty now echoed with the voices of young entrepreneurs discussing business ideas, single parents attending budgeting workshops, and community members of all ages eager to grow their skills. Each day brought new faces and fresh stories, and Clara felt a quiet pride knowing that her vision had become a thriving reality. Lena quickly found her place within the center, immersing herself in the programs, listening to the needs of the community, and helping organize events. Her natural compassion and leadership shone brightly, and it didn't take long for the center's visitors to recognize her as Clara's granddaughter. People began turning to Lena for guidance, admiring her enthusiasm and the legacy she was building alongside her grandmother. One day, as Clara entered the center, she spotted Lena in a corner, deep in conversation with a young man who looked about 20. He spoke animatedly, his hands moving with each word, clearly inspired by the advice Lena was offering. Clara felt a swell of pride and admiration watching Lena embody the very values she'd worked so hard to instill: empathy, understanding, and a genuine belief in others' potential. Clara felt as though she were looking at a younger version of herself, someone who had once dreamed of making a difference but was now standing on the shoulders of experience and wisdom. As the young man left, his face glowing with excitement, Lena noticed Clara and walked over, her face bright with a mix of joy and purpose. "Grandma," she began, her eyes shining, "it's incredible. Every day I meet people with dreams so big they can barely contain them. And they look at me with such hope, like they're finally being seen." Clara smiled, her voice filled with warmth. "That's exactly what this place is for, Lena. A space where people can finally feel recognized, where their dreams are given room to grow." They continued their day together, speaking with visitors, attending workshops, and working on upcoming events. The center was buzzing with life, and Clara's heart brimmed with fulfillment, knowing that everything she had worked for was finally serving its purpose. As the months passed, Clara gradually began stepping back, letting Lena take on more responsibilities and trusting her with decisions. Lena thrived in her new role, and Clara watched with a sense of peace, knowing that her legacy was in capable hands. Lena's leadership was marked by empathy and a tireless commitment to the community, and she had an innate ability to connect with people, offering them not only guidance but genuine friendship. One evening, after a particularly long day, Clara and Lena found themselves alone in the center, tidying up after a successful event. The room was quiet, the day's energy finally settling as the last of the visitors had left. They sat together in the main classroom, their faces softened by the dimming light, a peaceful silence enveloping them. "Lena," Clara began, her voice gentle, "I couldn't be prouder of you. Watching you grow, seeing the way you lead with kindness and strength, it brings me more joy than I could ever express. This center, it's yours now, and I know you'll continue to make it something extraordinary." Lena reached over, her hand clasping Clara's, her eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you, Grandma. I wouldn't be here without you. Everything I know about leading, about building something that matters, I learned it from you." Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of wisdom and love. "Remember, Lena, leadership is not about control or status. It's about listening, understanding, and giving others a chance to shine. Keep that close to your heart, and this place will continue to grow in ways we can't even imagine." As they sat together, a gentle peace filled the room. Clara felt a deep satisfaction, a sense that her journey had come full circle. She had started with dreams of her own, dreams that had once seemed impossible, but she had persevered, and in doing so, she had built a legacy of hope that would endure through Lena and all those who would walk through the center's doors. In the years that followed, the Resource Center grew into a beacon of empowerment, a place where dreams came to life and where the community thrived. Lena continued to expand its programs, reaching even more people and forming new partnerships that strengthened its impact. The center became a model of success, inspiring other neighborhoods to create similar spaces, spreading Clara's vision beyond the community she had called home. Clara's story became part of the center's legacy, shared by visitors who had benefited from her vision and mentorship. Young people who had once been uncertain of their futures spoke of her as the woman who had seen their potential, who had given them a chance to rise. Her presence lingered in every corner of the center, a quiet, steady force that reminded everyone who came through its doors of the power of resilience, kindness, and purpose. In her later years, Clara would often visit the center, watching from a quiet corner as Lena carried forward the mission they had built together. She would sit, a contented smile on her face, listening to the laughter and discussions, the energy and life that filled the space. And every time she saw Lena working with the community, offering advice or simply listening, Clara knew that her story, her legacy, was safe. One afternoon, as Clara sat by the window of the center's small cafe, a young woman approached her, her eyes bright with admiration. "Ms. Hayes," she began, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you. This place, it changed my life." Clara smiled, her heart warmed by the words. "Thank you, dear. This place belongs to everyone who comes through these doors. It's here because of people like you, who dare to dream." The young woman left, her face filled with hope, and Clara watched her go, feeling the depth of what she had built. She knew that the center would continue, that its walls held the dreams of countless people who would walk through, find their voices and step into their futures. When Clara finally passed, her legacy lived on, deeply rooted in the resource center and carried forward by Lena. The community gathered to honor her, sharing stories of the lives she had touched, the hope she had inspired, and the love she had shown to everyone around her. Lena, now a strong and compassionate leader in her own right, spoke at the memorial, her words filled with love and reverence. "Grandma taught me that true success is measured not by what we take, but by what we give." She built this place to be a sanctuary of dreams, a place where each person could feel seen and valued. And I promised to carry her vision forward, to keep building, to keep growing, just as she would have wanted. The center continued to flourish, growing with each passing year, a testament to Clara's dream and Lena's dedication. And through it all, Clara's spirit remained, a quiet, guiding force that whispered to each person who entered, reminding them of their worth and potential. Generations came and went, and the Resource Center became a beloved institution, a beacon of hope and possibility. Clara's legacy lived on, woven into the stories of everyone who had found their way there. Her life had been one of resilience and love, a life that had built something lasting, something powerful, something that would endure for generations. And in every heart that found courage, in every dream that took flight, Clara's legacy remained, a reminder that true success lies in empowering others and leaving the world brighter than we found it.